Good evening. If we could please call this meeting to order, and if we could start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you.
Okay, our first order of business is adoption of the agenda. I do have one item to add, which will be item 8.1, notice of motion from Councillor Turnbull regarding COVID relief programme.
Any other additions? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept the agenda.
Next item is adoption of the minutes from our last meeting on June 21st.
Any errors, omissions? All right, seeing none.
Moving along now to presentations. Perhaps for the last time, we have our COVID-19 update from Merrick Brown, who's our Manager of Support Services and Director of Emergency Management for Fire Services.
Welcome, Merrick.
Your Worship, members of council, I'd like to take tonight to paint a little bit of a picture for you. Current state. We're currently sitting at 831 active cases within the province, 5 of those which would be in Madison at. 48.4% of eligible Albertans are now vaccinated. Within Madison at, that's higher, 52.3% of our own residents are vaccinated. Hospital admissions continue to be on the decline. The province is decreasing the frequency of their updates. Almost all restrictions are lifted. This definitely signals confidence on the horizon. And with this confidence, tonight's update will also be my last update for you tonight. I want to just mention, though, that confidence does not mean that we should forget about everything that we've learned over the past 16 months. Staying home when we're sick, washing our hands on a regular basis won't be something that we can forget for some time to come. Looks a lot different 2 years from now from what it would have been 2 years back. With stage 3, we saw city facilities open. We saw the majority of our restrictions lifted. Some still do remain. We have masking in transit, masking in specific facilities. Provincial restrictions still include quarantine requirements, isolation requirements. And with the city facilities being opened, we are definitely at a near normal. And I use that term intentionally, near normal. And we are at a near normal from an intentional basis as well. It's not because we didn't have time to take down plexiglass barriers. We do this by intention. When members of the public walk into our facilities, even though we have hit stage 3, we want people to feel welcome. We want people to feel comfortable, and we still want them to feel safe. So when you walk into our facilities, you will still see those traditional measures. You will still see our staff physically distancing. You will still see those plexiglass barriers up, as we see tonight now. There are some changes, such as mask use, but we do want our patrons to feel comfortable and safe at the same time. Throughout our response, and that would be the city's response over the past 16 months, we've really focused on 2 specific, I'll call them maybe large buckets of objectives. One was very outward facing, supporting Alberta Health Services, supporting Alberta Health, supporting our residents throughout this process. And the other was very much inward facing. That's what the public didn't see a lot of. This is what I call, and have continued to call, business continuity. As much as the province has gone into stage 3, and lifted the majority of the restrictions, that doesn't necessarily mean that the virus is gone. In fact, it's still here. Isolation and quarantine requirements are still with us. Staying home when you're sick. If you do test positive, there is still that requirement to isolate. If you are deemed as a close contact, there is still that requirement to quarantine. All of this is the single biggest threat to business continuity. So even though from an outward-facing perspective, you won't see me here, but there is still that aspect on keeping the power going, keeping clean water delivered to our residents, all of that must still continue. So even though we moved into stage 3, it didn't change much from a business continuity perspective. It's not simply the province flicking a switch and suddenly we're okay. From an internal perspective, we still have the majority of our controls in place. We still have, as we see right here, physically distancing. We still have all of our plexiglass barriers up, our daily self-assessments for our own staff, contractor practices in place to ensure our infrastructure projects are maintained on time. We still have internal contact tracing processes. So not much has actually changed from an internal perspective, and that was done by intention. That gives us the ability, and I'll call it turning the dial with the controls, is to slowly turn those controls off, but at the same time, if required, we can slowly turn those controls back up, is turning the dial. That is, like I said, done by intention. So as much as I enjoyed standing here in front of you for the past 16 months, I am confident with the path moving forward. I am confident based on our vaccination rates, and I should mention that the fully vaccinated rate is incredibly high if you look at it from a global perspective. We have done well. We should be proud of where we are. But at the same time, we still need to be cautious. And as much as I stand here now and say this is my last update to you, we will still continue to monitor. We will still be prepared to respond as necessary. As I said many, many times before in front of you, the COVID-19 virus is still here, and unfortunately, it will probably be with us for quite some time. Therefore, we will still be closely monitoring this. Thank you.
Thank you, Merrick. Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, to Merrick, thank you very much for your report. For those who are listening at home, obviously we have this indication that this could be, and hopefully in the right context, of course, is your last update. But you're still well employed, clearly, with the city, and you still have your job and your title, and there are a lot of different jobs that you play under your hat as Manager of Support Services and DEM. So first of all, on behalf of myself, and I would think council and the community, thank you for being that voice every day. I didn't have the pleasure of joining every day, but certainly you've been doing that on a daily basis in many cases, but certainly for the community and council for many months. And you might say, well, I just did my job, but a job where we know we have a trusted person who's bringing the information, kind of taking the salient points and elevating them to our ears and the public's ears in a meaningful, discernible way is not an easy task, and you did that extraordinarily well. So this is not to pat you on the back, but to say thank you on behalf of everyone for that. I very much appreciated it. From the standpoint of the information you presented, things are in the right direction. We've been talking about directions many times through these updates each week or each other week to the community, and as you indicated, the near normal, that dial pivoting opportunity that you indicated, great analogy. My question then maybe is around, well, first of all, the respect that I've observed within the city. facilities, and the broader community for people who, and we talked about that last time, who choose to continue to wear a mask or not. And in some cases, and I will say in one case, I went to a business who, it wasn't a big business, but it was a business who, when I entered, I noticed the front person at the front desk wearing a mask, and I had a mask with me. This is actually on July 1st, and the conversation ensued around not making me feel uncomfortable whether I chose to enter without a mask or not, but I asked, I said, I'm ready to do that to respect the business owner as well. And in that case, my wife and I wore a mask. So it goes both ways, and I think it's just incredibly important to reaffirm to the community everything they've done, to my knowledge, very well, which is respecting everyone who have chosen to continue to wear a mask or not. And when I go into different businesses or different places, I notice there are a lot of people who choose to do that. And I have seen and heard of no confrontations, no issues with that. So I just think it's a huge pat on the back of the citizenry of this community for respecting one another. And as we continue to dial up or down, whichever way you want to look at it, let's continue to do that with respect, cognizant of all kinds of variables that can contribute to a dial up or down, and I think that's important. So my I guess short question would be, in the matter of the few days that we have been under this new I guess transformed environment of having the opportunity to wear a mask or not in most places, have you come across any immediate issues or concerns or impediments to that, not from the standpoint of gossip or storytelling, but from the standpoint of the city and its ability to open up to the community again? Again, I have not heard anything, so I want to kind of frame it in that context, but I wanted to hear it from you as well.
That's an excellent question, through the chair. Personally, I have not heard anything. In fact, I'm very proud of obviously both our own staff and the public. I myself have been out quite frequently over the past few days and witnessed the same thing that you have, Councillor Dumanowski, in the fact that respect is there. I think I've said it many times, and perhaps cautioned individuals on that matter, just given the fact that we were preparing to enter that phase that can be perhaps shocking to some. But with that, I'm confident with how we are acting as a community, because it can be distraught for some individuals. And just even from that perspective, I mean, I still carry a mask with me. I don't think that's something that you can get away with or should get away with for any time soon. I mean, it's just the early phase of this, and we should all be prepared, given the fact if it's a business requirement. All of these different matters are important to respect, not only the individual, but the facility or business that you're entering, and the fact that some additional controls may be in place just to protect not only themselves, but their own staff, for that matter. So I personally have not observed anything of concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Well, and I guess it's more comments than questions, Merrick. It's interesting. I work for an organization that's national in nature, so the kind of face covering bylaw is almost national in their direction. So your point's well made, and I guess I just reiterate what I've said last time, is just be courtesy to each other. People are making decisions in their lives, and if that's the case and you see someone that's decided to keep a mask, just give them the courtesy. And with no judgment, we're getting there. Absolutely. I maybe you should be having a mask burning ceremony eventually, but we still got some time to go. But that aside, I just wanted to tell you that it's a little bit bittersweet tonight, this being your last presentation, but yet that signifies that we've kind of overcome tremendous amount of hurdles over the last many months, quite frankly. All things being equal, you were very helpful to us as councillors and the citizenry You walked us through the highs and lows and the celebrations and quite frankly, sometimes the finger wagging that needs to happen. You were comforting, but yet frank with your direction. And you have a level of integrity that I think just exudes out of you. And I think for that and many more, I just want to appreciate your efforts and say job well done. And like you had said, we're not done yet, but this being your last presentation, I just want to thank you personally. Thanks, Merrick.
Thank you. Councillor Varga.
Thank you, Your Worship. Merrick, it seems like a long time, and all the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday phone calls where we had many questions for you, and you tended to answer them all the time, even though you had no direction from the government a lot of the times. It was probably done on a whim to make it good for the people of Medicine Hat. So I thank you for that. There was a lot of times where you had no backing either from the provincial government as to what was going on and what was happening, and the information that was coming down the pipe was instantaneous. When we got it, you got it too, so, which is kind of unfair to the people that are looking after things that are supposed to happen within our community, right? One question I do have, Merrick, is what can people expect that's not going to change, that they might gripe about? I would love to hear that, because there is some things that are not going to change now that it's happened in the past 16 months. So can you enlighten us on some of those things with the city that might not change and might expect that you're going to get some grumblings about?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, we've had quite a few, perhaps not necessarily formal conversations, but maybe informal conversations on this. And, you know, just throughout the presentation, I intentionally said staying home when you're sick for a reason. And I can even recall myself, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years, you wake up and you might have a little bit of a sore throat or a sniffly nose, and you go, I'm okay. I can still go to work. This is going to change. You know, just even from a human behavior side of things, I don't necessarily want to say from perhaps a city policy perspective or anything like that, but I think just from a I guess a human behavior perspective, when you wake up and you are feeling ill, I think gone are the days when you're going to push yourself to come to work. This has changed. This has changed how we operate, just from an organizational perspective, and the fact that we can work from home. If we are feeling a little bit under the weather, things like this can happen. We've tested it. And as much as, you know, we've had a lot of, many unfortunate circumstances throughout the past 16 months, I do also want to recognize that we've perhaps had some unintended positive consequences associated with this, because things like working from home and remote working and all of these other aspects that increase efficiency and have that ability to overcome, that may not have necessarily come about if, you know, a pandemic or such circumstance would have occurred. So as much as I say that, you know, waking up in the morning and having a sore throat is going to change the way that we think going forward, there are still some, I guess, opportunities or positive outcomes from that as well.
With that being said, thank you for your work over the past 16 months, and hopefully we don't see you again giving reports, but you never know.
The best job is to work yourself out of this job. So, Merrick, you and I have spent the last 16 months together more so than just about anybody else. And I've sensed your exhaustion. I've had the exhaustion myself, and I've seen you take very few days off in this last 16 months, and you've always been here. And you and I have come to know each other, and from the early days with the press conferences and trying to get the word out, and to these final days. And I know that I have been pushed hard back at you, and some of the other council members have pushed a little bit as well. But publicly, this council has always supported you and taken your recommendations. And I want you to know that we did value your input and everything you said, because I think we've proven it publicly that we did support every single one of your recommendations from day one when it came to not declaring a state of emergency, which was a unique thing in the province of Alberta, without panicking, a steady, stoic hand on the wheel. So I really appreciate that. I think that's about it, but I think we'll round of applause. Now go take a vacation with your family.
I intend to.
Okay. Could I get a motion for reception?
So moved.
Second.
If we could vote.
Councillor McIntosh?
Oh, yeah.
Support.
And that was unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, Merrick. Moving on now to reports, Energy and Infrastructure Committee, June 22nd, just for information.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
If we could vote?
Support.
Thank you. And that was unanimous?
Item 5.2 is Public Services Committee meeting, June 28th, again, for information with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
I'll move that report for information. I did want to make a couple comments.
Second.
Go ahead, Councillor Turner.
So our staff have been working diligently for the last quite a few months on putting all of this information together, and we're at the point now where we're going to be, over the next couple of months, looking for feedback from our citizens. So what I'm asking everyone to do is just kind of keep a close eye on social media and the regular media outlets in the city, and we will be publicizing where and when we're going to have these events. We're going to have some pop-up tents in various parks. We're going to have some static displays in some of our venues. So I really encourage you to become engaged in this. We have some major decisions we have to make in our city over the next few years, particularly on some of our facilities which are aging. Some of them are up to 40 years old, and the decision has to be made, are we going to continue to repair them? Are we going to be looking to replace them? So this is all, the more information we can get from our citizens, it certainly helps us make our decisions, and hopefully we're not going to make everybody happy. I can say that right now, but we're certainly going to try to do the best we can to deliver our services to our citizens and give them good value for the money that we're spending.
Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think Councillor Turner was absolutely right. This is not an easy thing to do when you're talking about a city that's expanded substantially from when some of our older recreation facilities were built. We have whole new areas in the city that have zero recreation facilities. No pool, no rink, massive areas. The cities will grow in different areas, and that's one of the future, the good things about this plan is how are we going to address our city's needs as it grows into the future. And so I do hope citizens do get out and get involved. We've had a few in the newspaper, and I've had a few emails about people showing their pleasure or displeasure about what may or may not happen. But I think we have to go through that process. We have to get all the information we can, and then at the end of the day, council will have to make that decision for the long term and what's best for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Varga.
Through the chair, maybe to James, I'm looking at the IAP2 spectrum, which you guys use that you're going to be using. Can I ask, is there a number of, like a percentage of people that you're looking for to get a good idea as to what we can change and what we don't have to change to this? Like, say we've got 62,000 people. Of course, not every 62,000 or 63,000 people are going to do a survey or participate in this, right? But is there a number that's going to be, I always complain about that because there's surveys that are out there and we get 100 surveys back or 200 surveys back, and we're making tough decisions on that, or your department's making tough decisions on that. I would love to see a lot more in that. And I see in this, it says that the empowerment part is there, right? So if there's only a few, it's usually the strong majority that are speaking at this time, right? So I'm just wondering how that process is going to work and how you follow this example of how you're going to empower the people once they've given their input into it, and how we're going to change things in the rec master plan, if that's possible, if you have an answer for that.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a couple of comments related to the question. The IAP2 spectrum, with the plan that we're moving forward with, is revising the existing two documents, our park system management strategy and our recreation master plan, and really consolidating those into a more concise document that updates what needs to be updated, but keeps the core elements of the existing plan that either has not been implemented fully yet from the last master plan or is still relevant today. Our focus is more on the involving, consulting and informing on those sections where we really want to go out to the public and say, is this still valid? Does this still represent what the needs of the residents of Medicine Hat want for recreation, for park spaces, environmental reserves, and really environmental overall when it comes to parks and recreation? Related to the specific responses and numbers, we're utilizing a consultant to help us with the surveys for residents is one component, stakeholder meetings, the online forums. So when you look at the picture as a whole, they are weighted based on what we hear back from the public. If we hear a very vocal minority that comes forward and gives us feedback on a specific issue, it is weighted accordingly. And so statistically, it would be a relevant representation of the population based on what they're bringing forward. If it's about Crestwood Rec Center, if it's about pools. Also, our future trends fall into place. So within the presentation in council package, there is just an example of how that's weighted. So it depends on responses, but not only responses from the public as a whole as the only factor. So future capital plans, what we know for trends. So if we see a decline in a sport and we know that that's a current utilization decline, or we see a future decline, that's going to play a factor in it as well. So there's a number of different sources where we're going to get our information. Certainly public engagement through surveys is one of them, but also the stakeholder groups, the future capital planning, and what we see for trends are just a few of the other sources.
So is every person in Medicine Hat or every resident in Medicine Hat going to get something in the mail that says to be a part of this, or is it going to be done through social media and that way of getting to the people of our community?
So through the chair, we're looking at using Shape Your City, which is an electronic tool that we have for surveying residents in the community. There are some specific stakeholder groups that are being set up, as well as the pop-up tents. We've also worked with school divisions to actually get in classrooms and have conversation with kids. So we're trying to get a representation of the whole population, but it will be communicated, the stakeholder engagement through the online forum will be communicated out to the community through a number of different forums.
So, sorry, through the chair, I mean, I'm a sports guy, so I would love to hear everything that's going to happen from the people of Medicine Hat and what they'd like to see happen in the future within our city, right? So the trends are important, but the trends of Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto don't really mean much to me because we're a small community. We do things in a different way, right? That trend might not work here, but it might, but it'll be great to see what the people of Medicine Hat think is something that we might need, a path we might want to go down, and maybe the norm isn't the way to do it anymore, right? So I'm really interested to see what's going to happen once all this information comes back to you. So I'm glad to hear that the consultant's going to put it together and come back with something that might be very exciting to our community as to what's going to happen in the future in our Parks and Rec department and our master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Well, and I appreciate the initiative on this, and you're right, it is a shape our future kind of conversation, and certainly our rec facilities do weigh on us, both financially and otherwise. I mean, we need them, there's no doubt about it, but how do we spend prudently in a manner that makes sense? And I guess my question is, and I just kind of jumped on Councillor Turnbull's comments that, you know, I think at the end of the day, everyone would love to have a skating rink a block away, a swimming pool a block away, et cetera. Movement onto a trail within a half a block so I can get onto my trails. Knowing that that's not part of reality, is there a movement to create the goalposts to the citizenry to say, and I guess I'm just wondering, is there physical or financial parameters that you're setting out, or are you just allowing citizens to have their absolute dreams and aspirations and then just kind of working from there? Because my concern is if we get the dreams and aspirations, that's great, but in some ways you've asked their opinion, they've given it to you, and then the likelihood is if it's not within our kind of where we think we want to go, then you get some animosity and some frustration by the citizenry. So I'm just wondering, as long as we kind of paint within the circles or paint within the lines with our expectations to the citizens, or is it going to be an absolute open dialogue for them to have their dreams and ambitions, and then we kind of pare it down for them?
Through the chair, when you go with public engagement, I think the danger of going out with a blank slate and saying, what is it that you desire? And you can ask for a gold-plated plan and not be able to deliver on that. And that certainly sets expectations without being able to deliver. Our approach is certainly not that. We have varying degrees of success with public engagement where we've said, tell us what you see as the future for different parks or Equidale or different amenities. And without setting the parameters, residents and respondents really don't understand what it is that they're responding to. And none of us would, without knowing what the parameters are. Our focus has been on really creating setting the picture for what it is that we're looking to answer, and then saying within these parameters, what is it that we can do? If there's one thing that probably didn't have any explanation within your package, it's the visual of the chessboard. And administration would be probably very tired of hearing me say this, but we cannot make facility decisions in isolation. So when we look at designing a new facility or retiring an old facility, there will be a sequence of things that have to happen. That's part of the change management process also that we have to work with, because existing facilities, although they've been in our community and they've been in neighborhoods, they can't exist forever that way. When we look at what is walkable, we know that trail systems, people want to live within X number of meters of a playground or within a trail system. But as you get to a bigger amenity, what can your community afford? Can you afford to have a rink and a pool in every neighborhood? We don't have that now, even with the neighborhood pools. Our pools, our rec facilities, our Equidale Regional Park, they're all aging. A lot of them were built with infrastructure money in the 1980s, and they're coming to end of life. And so these decisions, if you make them in isolation, you potentially miss opportunities to say, keeping in line with our municipal development plan, to have multi-use recreational sites or multi-use sites. There are opportunities for us to look at combining facilities, opportunities, whether we run them or someone else runs these. There's a lot of outcomes and a lot of solutions that we can look at, but we need to do it in the right sequence. And so to go in with the parameters to make sure that we're in line with the MDP and not just have a blank slate, we'll really put the pieces on the chessboard. And our goal is to put in front of council what we've heard and what we believe is the best sequence to make those decisions.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
James, in your package, you've got a green, I think it's on where it shows priorities. Priority weighing for outdoor amenities. Can you explain that chart a little bit for me? Is this one that's already taken place or is going to take place?
Through the chair, this sorry for holding this
Yep.
up, that's what you're referring
Yep.
to.
Yep.
This is actually just a sample.
Okay,
So this was from our consultant, so this would be a sample of, if we've heard resident surveys saying multi-use trails were the #1 priority, we also heard it come up in every stakeholder meeting. The trends would say this is a priority, that's how it would go for a 2 weighting, you know, if we're hearing it
okay.
multiple
So
times.
our outdoor amenities will look a lot different than what's on this example.
Absolutely, this is just,
Okay.
just a sample.
Okay, I was looking at it and going, oh, okay, we don't even have some of these things, right? So, okay, thank you for that clarity.
Any other comments? All right, if we could vote. Counselor McIntosh?
Support. Support.
And that was unanimous, thank you.
Item 5.3 is the Corporate Services Committee meeting June 29th with the tax cancellation request for 1319 Bridge Street Southeast for adoption.
I'll move that report as indicated.
Second.
Any questions, comments on this report? All right, seeing none, so it is a recommendation to deny, so a vote yes is to support the recommend. Counselor Hirsch?
Well, so I appreciate, and I am speaking on item #1. You know, without getting into the weeds on this, there certainly was a dramatic shift in terms of the taxation levels at the different years. And again, while I appreciate the applicant for this reimbursements position, I just do struggle with the fact that there, even though it might be the similar buildings, there is a myriad of tangible things that could happen to affect that valuation. And although I appreciate the fact that the individual found that there was a discrepancy, again, for the purposes and the information that was provided to me, I'm not comfortable at this point in time supporting the applicant, and I will be voting for the, as recommended.
Any other, Counselor Turnbull?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, this really is a very difficult situation for the owner of this building. So when I looked at it and I drove by them, they were built in the same year, identical buildings, identical floor plans. They have the exact revenue, because they're duplexes, the exact revenue generation, which are all based on, all those things are the assessment, tax assessment is based on all those things. And I get it that, you know, he didn't appeal, there's appeal time, but if you don't know that your neighbor is paying substantially less for the very same building as you are, and he sent a very detailed report as to his taxes, and it's about almost $5,000 over those years. And $5,000 is a lot of money. And more than that, it becomes, for me, a fairness issue. So either we have one of two problems. Either we have made a mistake on the assessment of the neighbor, who should have been paying more, or we've made an assessment on this gentleman here that he was paying too much. So, sorry, not enough and not too much. Yeah, sorry, I got that backwards. So I guess it's a lesson learned, perhaps, that corporate services may, through to assessment, to say, in fact, did we make a mistake? If we didn't, fine. If there was other factors, I think you brought that up, and I don't sit on your committee, and I think you're right. It's very difficult to compare sometimes, but this one seems pretty level in my mind. But that's just one person's vote. So I'm not going to. I'm going to support this tax. Is it yes or no for this?
No, if you're, so the recommendation is to decline.
Okay.
So yes vote is to decline and no is to not.
Okay. So I won't be supporting it anyways.
Counselor Dumanowski?
Well, Your Worship, I appreciate that this application is very much in front of the public domain because of the need to do so if there is an application or a request by council to waive or rebate. Makes it a little bit hard because you try to be respectful of all the processes at the same time honoring the assessment process, and I have to say in this case, although they appear to look like duplicate buildings, there are a number of variables, certainly we've come to understand and do understand, that contribute to a different assessment, not the least of which when those properties were purchased or sold, what conditions they were purchased or sold in. Was it without real estate assistance? Was it by buyer and owner transacted? The finishing quality, there are a number of conditions. We've seen a very hot real estate market very recently and currently, which has in many cases caused properties to be sold well over asking price. There are many situations where there are or appear to be duplicate homes. I could name many of them, not the least of which my very own, but I won't. But I'll go back to the variables that contribute to the end assessed rate certainly derive a difference. And in this case, I'm not going to say it's not insignificant. If we were to go back 20 years, it would be 20,000. If we went back further, it would be more. I don't want to put a quantum number around this and suggest that it's all about that or it's not. I sympathize, but I think, with the greatest absolute respect, we have an assessment process that has been scrutinized many times over the years, and we've even had ministerial participation, and our processes are approved, and everything we do is very much in the up and up. And I gotta believe that the sanctity of the process has to be upheld here. And if we move to do something here, we will have many, many, many more. And we've been around this table, and we all know we've had many who have not gone to the length of bringing it here, who have been very upset or challenged. And again, we could talk to any length about that, but I'm not without sympathy, but I think the process is there. The appeal process is there. If anything, I will end on this heightens the need for people to be aware of their assessed value in relation to their neighbors and other like properties. You have the ability to go on the city website and see what your neighbors' assessed values are. You can compare them. So I'm, again, not without sympathy, but I think very much so it's incumbent upon council to support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this whole assessment issue has been a thing that's bothered me, probably one of the reasons why I ran for council in the first place. And then there's no perfect way to assess a building. And this one here looks, I have to agree with Councillor Turnbull, looks more to me like a fairness thing. This gentleman has presented the numbers. These buildings certainly look the same on the outside. Maybe there's some different things in the inside, but I would just about bet that we didn't have assessors actually go in to these buildings and walk through them. I mean, there is part of this mass, what do they call it, mass appraisal assessment we do, and I would assume they're both rental properties too, so I'm not sure whether the rents are the same in both of them. So if you were to calculate the value based on income, that might make a different value. That was not presented in our notes here, so I'm just assuming they just took the actual assessed value and compared the two buildings. So over this period of time, $4,700 is a fair amount of money, and I'm just kind of debating whether I'm supporting this or not. For me, it definitely is a fairness issue, but it's also, we can't be perfect on assessments. I mean, it's just an impossibility when you're assessing 25,000 properties or whatever. You're going to have some variances, and that's why the appeal process is there. But this gentleman didn't know he had a problem until he started looking at the neighbor's assessments and saw that his was assessed quite a bit higher. That's why he paid more taxes. So I will support the staff's recommendation here, but I think I'm going to be doing it quite reluctantly.
Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Your Worship. So for me, this is a pretty simple decision. The onus is on the homeowner on a yearly basis to keep tabs on what's going on with your assessment. The city has a website where you can go and see everybody's assessment in your local area, and if you have an issue, you can appeal that. I just can't help but think how many people would be going back in years and making the phone call to the assessment department saying they want their $250 back because they were getting assessed incorrectly. So the can of worms would be open here, and I think we have to support this recommendation.
Thank you. Did Councillor Hirsch, were you still in the queue? And Councillor Turner, you're okay as well? Sorry, you guys, your names are just showing up. Yeah, so they were assessed the same in 2010. Then there's a huge massive variance starting in 11. And then obviously the complainant complained and it got reassessed and they're assessed the same again. That to me says an error. Councillor, was that discussed at committee? So you can see the chart with the comparable and the property, and all of a sudden, but unfortunately for the other property owner, his or her assessment went up to match the complainant's.
And I guess that's my,
But how can it be $100,000 difference on a $300,000 property? That's where I'm struggling, unless I'm not reading this correctly.
Mr. Chairman, I can perhaps help. I don't think you're reading anything incorrectly. The issue is that there were a difference in assessed values for two appearingly identical properties. The rationale for the difference is unavailable to us. The appeal period is in place to encourage people to check their assessments, and we go to great lengths to make sure that that information is easily accessible to taxpayers. If they're not doing it and they come back 5 to 10 years later and say they think that there was a mistake, the appeal period has closed. So council does have a remedy here. Council can cancel taxes if they so desire. But I take the warnings from council members who have cited it already that it is a inexact science. The process of assessing tax value for properties is an inexact science, and it does yield different values in different years, and taxpayers are encouraged to go through that. And when they do appeal, they are given the right to appeal to a very knowledgeable and impartial and powerful assessment review panel. So the process works. I have, even in the short time that I've been back to the city, seen occasions where taxpayers have missed the assessment window, and the council has upheld that the assessment window is open for you. You missed it and it closed, and you'll have to accept the assessment for that period. So I don't think you're misinterpreting anything, Mr. Chairman. It is an unfortunate circumstance.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Dumanowski, are you getting ready to vote, or are you thinking about? Okay, I'll call the question then.
Support.
Okay. And that passes 4-2.
Reports for reception now, the MPC meeting of June the 9th.
I move this report for reception.
second.
Any comments? All right, seeing none, if we could vote.
Support.
And that was unanimous, thank you.
Moving on to new bylaws, these are all for first reading only. Item 7.1 is Bylaw 4674, Bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Bylaw 4636, City of Medicine Hat Municipal Development Plan. These are mainly for the Hamptons area.
I move for leave to introduce bylaw number 4674, and that'll be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote,
Support.
thank you. And that was unanimous.
Item 7.2 is Bylaw 4679, a Bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Bylaw 3617, the Hamptons Area Structure Plan.
I move for leave to introduce bylaw number 4679, and that'll be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote,
Support.
That was unanimous, thank you.
Item 7.3 is Bylaw 4680, Bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Bylaw 4168, the City of Medicine Hat Land Use Bylaw, again for the Hamptons.
I move for leave to introduce bylaw number 4680, and that'll be read a first time.
Second.
If we could vote,
Support.
that was unanimous, thank you.
And item 7.4, Bylaw 4678, Bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Bylaw 4168, City of Medicine Hat Land Use Bylaw. This is a portion of the historic Clay District to direct control.
I move for leave to introduce bylaw number 4678, and that'll be read a first time.
Second.
If we can vote,
Support.
and that was unanimous, thank you.
Notice of motion, item 8.1, Councillor Turnbull is going to speak to his notice of motion regarding the COVID relief program.
I would like to introduce a motion this evening as new business and respectfully ask that council agree to waive the requisite notice of motion period.
If we could vote on waiving.
Support.
And you have consent? Go ahead, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. Council, I move that management be directed to prepare a second COVID relief program for the City of Madison Hat to assist our community in transitioning from a lockdown and restrictions back into a more normal set of circumstances in which to live and conduct business. The first COVID relief program was directed by council and administered by management and was successful in assisting our residents. The second program is also necessary and will be valued, I am sure, by our community. In terms of general guidance, management should be directed to develop a local COVID relief program in the amount of approximately $4.5 million to be funded from the city's Heritage Reserve Fund. Management's recommended program should be brought back to council at our next regular scheduled meeting. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, if we could vote on the notice of motion.
Support.
And that was unanimous, thank you. Seeing no more business before this council, we're adjourned till August 3rd of 2021.